Hey guys, this is Stowe Bishop with Radio Rothbard, and this week is our fall fundraising campaign. If you're a fan of Mises Institute content, and you must be if you're listening to this show, your $5 recurring donation goes a long way in allowing us to do the work that we're doing. And with your $5 donation at Mises.org/RR5, you will get a copy of Guido Holzman, How Inflation Destroys Civilization. This is his most recent publication, and you'll get a physical copy. Great for your own collection or to give to a friend. And that is a $5 recurring donation at Mises.org/RR5, or a $50 one-time donation will get it to you as well. And also, if you want to become a full Mises member for the entire year, getting all the perks that come with it, that comes with a $100 donation now. So again, thank you for supporting our fall fundraising campaign. Again, that is Mises.org/RR5.
Hello and welcome back to Radio Rothbard. I'm Ryan McMakin. I'm a senior editor with the Mises Institute. And with me, as usual, is Stowe Bishop, my associate editor. Now this time, let's talk a little bit about the Nord Stream pipeline, about energy in Northern Europe, about the situation with Russian gas in Germany, and that whole situation, which of course adds a much larger geopolitical element to the conflict in Ukraine right now. And sometimes, of course, some very key issues are going on where there's no actual shooting war. And so to talk about that a little bit, I've brought on Rosanna Weber, who's written some articles for Mises.org. And she had a recent article from last month called Germany's Nuclear Choice, Russian Energy Crisis Forces a Reckoning. So I wanted to have her on to talk a little bit. And she's joining us from London, and she is currently a graduate student at the London School of Economics. And so we're very pleased to have her with us. Welcome, Rosanna. And let's just start with talking a little bit about Nord Stream. Where does it come from? Why is it important? Because if people are following the news at all, they see that allegedly the pipeline was sabotaged, that no gas is moving through it now to Germany. And why is that important? How long has that been important? Is this something that's been around for decades? Just kind of fill us in a little bit about what the overall context of the Nord Stream pipeline is.
Right. Thank you for having me, first of all. So about Nord Stream 1, which was the first major pipeline that transported gas from Russia to Germany, that was finalized in 2011, roughly speaking. And ever since then, Germany has been getting increasingly larger amounts of gas from Russia for a comparatively cheap price. And then, of course, 2014, talks started about building a second pipeline, also from Russia to Germany, Nord Stream 2, to also further increase the gas that is delivered from Russia to Germany. And now in 2021, end of 2021, Nord Stream 2 was finalized, so to speak, so it could have been used. But then, of course, the war started between Russia and Ukraine, and it all became very political all of a sudden. And that then prompted the Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, to sort of abandon Nord Stream 2. And via Nord Stream 1, we still did get gas from Russia. We increased our dependence so much that our total gas supply was 50%, came 50% just from Russia, just to put that into perspective. So a large and substantial amount. And then, so from this year onwards, the amount of gas that we received from Russia became less and less. It was down to 50% of what was usually delivered, down to 20%. And they claimed it was, technical problems on the pipeline that needed to sort of be worked on, for why there were stops in delivery. And now for the last few weeks, I believe it's been down to completely zero. But I think it's pretty obvious that there are not just technical problems here that play a role, but it's also the wider political landscape here that is playing a role with Germany supporting Ukraine, delivering weapons, and generally giving some support, and of course also sanctioning Russia on many grounds. So all of that has played a role. The gas deliveries have now stopped or down to zero pretty much. And that, of course, puts Germany in a very difficult situation, to say the least. The relationship with Russia goes back way before Nord Stream 1. I think it was around the 1970s or so when first trading relationships with Russia were established under Willy Brandt, Chancellor then. And he supported this certain type of politics, which was called Ostpolitik, so Eastern policy, new Eastern policy. And it was this approach in politics that West Germany wanted to get closer to the Eastern European states, East Germany for one, but also the Soviet Union, and to establish trade relationships and all of that, and generally get a bit closer and establish a relationship of some sort, rather than, completely shutting down any sort of trade that could have gone on before then. And so they did that, and they built pipelines of some sort back then already. Back then the energy industry was also nationalized, so it was a bit different, of course. But that was working fine, and Russia did deliver gas relatively cheap too. And it seemed to work even when the industry was liberalized around 2000, I believe it was. It was still working fine, and Russia was still delivering gas. So further efforts were made to build Nord Stream 1 and then Nord Stream 2. But of course, that just really increased this dependence on this one supplier of gas for Germany. And I think we can see now really that the whole industry, people, but also the wider German economy is so much dependent on gas.
Right. And I think Germany's been remarkable, unique, a little bit different than I think what many Americans think of it in terms of U.S. policy toward Russia has, for more than a decade, been really nasty. And I don't think the U.S. has ever really come to terms with just playing nice with the Russian state, and even hasn't shown much interest in trade or any of that. But it seemed that Germany was more interested in building bridges looking eastward with both Russia and China, it seems, rather than trying to have as much of a contentious relationship as the U.S. seemed to be pursuing with Eurasia overall. But that seems to have been not gone well. Like, I don't fault Germany. Like, I don't think Germany was, they should have never trusted the Russians or something like that. But clearly the relationship has been damaged now, right, by this conflict. So what was, it seems, a relationship of some initial bridge building is at least for the time being not going well at all. So there's even higher costs than if the U.S. was encountering similar problems with Russia, is my understanding, because the U.S. doesn't have much trade with Russia overall, but the Germans, it seems, that were really trying to develop some trade relations there then, and that goes back then a while.
Yeah, arguably you can now say that it was a bad decision, but you do have to take into consideration that it did work fine for so many decades. But obviously with a trading partner like Russia, maybe you have to take other factors into consideration than if you're doing trade with, France, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, that did come back to haunt Germany, so to speak. And like I said, you can really notice the effect that this has had on the German population, but also the economy, because over the past years, Germany has focused a lot of attention into sort of whenever new homes were built, that they would have gas heating. So a lot of new houses were built with gas heating. So about 40% of the German homes now rely on gas as the main source for keeping warm in winter. But then, of course, the economy, as I mentioned, is also relies very much on it. And certain industries more than others, for example, steel or the chemical industry. Gas is also used to produce fertilizer, which now affects the agricultural sector, which therefore affects food prices in the supermarket. And that is being felt by everyone. So it's like a domino effect, essentially. So it started from one place and now everyone is sort of feeling it, if that makes sense.
This kind of seems like a false divide that often when we think about politics, we want to kind of break it up into different sort of sections in its own right. But here is where the domestic politics of Germany, particularly with its focus on certain energy programs, I think within Europe broadly, the way that anti-nuclear policies, which you touched on, anti kind of domestic energy production, really pushed by green political parties, created a certain dynamic within European countries, including Germany, and perhaps particularly in Germany, which when you combine that with so that increased the reliance upon the Russian dependence upon Russian oil. And of course, one of the things that makes Nord Stream pipeline different than a lot of other pipelines in the region, right, is that it bypasses Poland, it bypasses a lot of those Eastern European countries where this was kind of a direct connection. And so you have an increased reliance upon German energy production within Germany at the same time, while foreign policy, particularly for at least a decade plus now, has been increasingly agitating relations between NATO and Russia. That again, you're trying to divide these two different portions of your governance kind of creates issues when they don't align very well. And it seems that this is something that is affecting, obviously, Germany in particular, but really Europe as a whole, and has why Putin can so effectively weaponize energy, as a leverage chip, and of course that also creates larger geopolitical questions regarding the specific sabotage of the pipeline itself in the last few days. So again, that's the false difference between foreign and domestic policies once again raised its ugly head.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of where you can see how politics has in fact influenced and shaped the economy or the market in a way, or this industry in particular. Like you said, I mean, Putin turning off the gas pipeline is one political decision that has been made. Germany has made lots of more domestic political decisions, which have also led to it being in the position that it is right now. So, for example, in as I said, around the 2000s, the market was liberalized in that the industry wasn't nationalized in the strict sense. There was more competition allowed into the energy market. Customers were able to choose between different providers and all of that. However, there were still major political decisions made that shaped and formed the economy in that sense. So, I mean, quitting nuclear for one, and also quitting coal by 2038 are two decisions which play a major role. And then also various subsidies, which are given to renewable energy, is another one, which sort of distorts the market quite a lot, actually. So yeah, I think all of that has just come together, and it was one bad decision after another that has pushed Germany in this really uncomfortable position it is in right now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the nuclear situation. That's, of course, a significant thrust of your article from last month, is that the Germans have in the past used nuclear energy, focused much more than now on nuclear energy. And some things happened where Germany decided to move away from nuclear. And of course, that then limits your options. And if memory serves, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was tied to the disaster in Japan that they had with the reactor there, and that there was just worldwide a real invigoration of the anti-nuclear movement that occurred at that time. And so in the time since then, you've seen a decline in reactors, although the U.S. is looking to build a few more, but not as many as are going to come offline in the years before the new ones can come online. So there's really not much going on there, even though, of course, reactors are much safer now than they were back in the days of Chernobyl. I watched the Chernobyl miniseries on HBO, right? Even in junior high, though, I remember I did a report on Chernobyl, right? I've been fascinated by meltdowns and all of that problem for many years. And so it's not like a risk that doesn't exist, but when we're being told that burning coal or natural gas is going to destroy the entire planet, it would seem like something you would want to pursue. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the specifics were of the debate in Germany and why they decided to move away from that.
Sure. Like you said, the anti-nuclear power movement, that has been around for a while. I think it was actually one of the sort of cornerstones on which the Green Party in Germany was founded in the 80s. So that has always been part of their ideology and their political stance. They always felt very strongly about this. So, and they've always campaigned for it. So then in 2011, when, like you rightly said, Fukushima happened, and everyone in the world was just watching and seeing these horrible pictures. The entire movement just gained a huge momentum, especially in Germany. And I was 12 at the time, but I still remember everywhere the this yellow flag with the red sun on it, and it says Atomkraft, nein danke, nuclear power, no thanks. So that was just everywhere, really. And so because it gained such a momentum, I believe, that was then the point that the Green Party wasn't in the governing coalition at the time, I must add, but it was just spoken about everywhere and the media reported on it. And it was just so horrible seeing all these pictures that it seemed at the time like the right decision for Germany, as the only country, as far as I'm concerned, in the West, aside from Japan, to discuss nuclear power and whether we really want to stick to it and keep it going, or whether we want to quit. And Germany eventually came to the decision that they wanted to exit nuclear power. And that decision was made in 2011. And it was under a conservative center-right government, if you want to call it that, which is quite interesting. So it wasn't the Green Party who finally put it into legislation in the end, but the CDU and the FDP, in case those names ring a bell. So yeah, that decision was made, and I think the Green Party, for one, was very happy, of course. But everyone at the time, if you go back to look at even the more conservative politicians now, what they've said, everyone said that it was the right decision to eventually quit nuclear. So they all agreed on that pretty much.
So are there no functioning reactors currently in Germany, or they just haven't decommissioned all of them yet?
So we used to have, I believe, 17 reactors in Germany. And because we wanted to quit nuclear by the end of 2022, so this year, they are down to 3 running nuclear power plants at the moment. All these 3 should go out of service by the end of the year, according to the legislation that was passed in 2011. So now, with the situation in Ukraine and with the energy crisis, politicians have started to reconsider this and sort of thought of it as an option, at least. 3 reactors, of course, isn't the same as 17 before. But it would be at least something. And in a crisis like this, I think every little counts when it comes to energy. So there have been some stress tests run on these reactors, if they would even still be able to function, and safety checks and all of that. And as far as I'm concerned, two passed the checks, so they could continue running without any issues, and that is sort of now being considered. But the thing is, it's so short notice, because thinking you're gonna be switched off as a nuclear power plant in the next 3 months, but this uncertainty still being there, you don't know if you maybe have to continue running or not, or what's going to happen. No one really knows. I think that uncertainty is also a major problem with many other things, that solutions that were proposed to this energy crisis. A lot of it is sort of under consideration at the moment, and no one really knows if it's going to happen or not. And politicians change their minds pretty much every day, and one day say it's a good thing, next day, no, we actually don't want to do this. So it's a big back and forth. But there are essentially 3 running nuclear power plants at the moment still, which were thought to go out of service by the end of the year.
Well, and that's one of the things I found amusing about your articles. You highlighted how even the Green Party position, given the realities being faced right now, now the Greens are less aggressive regarding nuclear power, even coal power. And so can you talk about a little bit about that, about some of the immediate kind of changes in the political framework there and the way that they kind of view energy policy?
Yeah, I think it's quite funny because for so many parties and politicians, the things they say now would be completely opposite to what they would argue even just a year ago, really. So with coal, for example, that's an interesting one. I mean, the Green Party with Robert Habeck being now of the Green Party being now the Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, he was still very consistent in wanting to keep the nuclear power plants shut after this year. He was sticking very much to that. And I think it's because this ideology was always so much part of the was such a big part of the Green Party for so long, to want to get out of nuclear power. So he was very consistent in that and sticking to it. So his solution then was to instead increase burning more coal, which of course emits so much more carbon dioxide, for example, than the nuclear power plants. So that was quite interesting, to say the least, for that suggestion to come from a Green Party politician. But now, considering the state of it all, they are also considering now to at least put these two power plants back in service. The blame is not really on them for pushing quitting nuclear for so long, or for the government back then in 2011 for actually finalizing this. The blame, so to speak, is more put on France now, because we used to import a lot of nuclear power from France after we quit nuclear in 2011, and because their power plants at the moment, they are being refurbished or sort of looked after at the moment. So half of them are also out of service, which means that France's energy supply is lower than usual, and that's apparently quite a normal thing over the summer. They, do these tests and run these tests and all of this, so that they're ready for the winter. But that just means that France has less energy to export to Germany. So now that we're seriously considering continuing with the two power plants, that is sort of being pushed as an issue that has been caused by France not exporting enough energy to us. So the blame is always with someone else, I guess.
Have any of the other countries surrounding Germany, have they ever developed their nuclear industries? Is there any hope of them having an energy surplus, or is it just, of course, they have less capital. These are lower income countries generally to the south and the east of Germany. So I don't know what development they've got going, but are there any options there, or have they also followed a general denuclearization policy?
I think after 2011, Germany was the only country that that took this hard stance to say we want out of nuclear completely. Germany was the only country. France, on the other hand, has loads of nuclear power plants and is able to provide most of its energy by itself. I know that Poland exports quite a lot of coal to us, because, of course, we also want to quit coal by 2038. So now, in these times when we need so much more energy, that has, at least in the past, been a source for coal energy, at least, or for coal. But that's as far as I know what our neighboring countries are doing.
So for a little context, what would you say is the situation with nuclear in the U.S. at the moment? How would you describe that? I mean, I live in the Western U.S. where there's just an abundance of natural gas, and you even still see coal trains go by every now and then. So, and there aren't really any nuclear power plants in the Rocky Mountain part of the country, possibly because there's so little water. I don't know if that's a big factor for it. But in Florida, down where you are there any talks about doing new plants down there, or what's the situation?
What's interesting is I think in terms of the nuclear question in particular, it's almost more of a generational divide than it is a partisan divide. Washington politics being what it is, typically the conversation on energy policies kind of just deforms into, kind of tribal, do whatever the oil industry wants, or the national gas or natural gas pipelines, things like that, kind of traditional, conservative forms of energy production versus, Green New Deal and renewable energy and all of the sort of green aspect proposals within the Democratic Party. But I think you're seeing increasingly, younger politicians are talking more about the need as kind of energy, or as nuclear energy being, sort of a way of innovating out of some of the concerns that both sides have for the other. I know Andrew Yang, during his overhyped presidential run in 2020, he was talking about thorium reactors. During Democrat primary debates, you have Blake Masters out in Arizona, who has made development in American nuclear power part of sort of his flank. And what's interesting is that both, I think the conversation about nuclear energy is more often being had kind of within the sort of, let's call it center of American politics, kind of the Joe Rogan style crowd, white, right, where people that kind of pride themselves in not being overly ideological but more pragmatic, and so the degree to which I don't think any of this is breaking through into the mainstream of either party's leadership per se, but I think this is one of the examples of, again, this sort of generational divide that exists. I think within both parties. I'm not quite sure with the AOCs of the world. I'm sure they're probably they have more kind of green sort of concerns there. But there is, I think, more of a generational divide than any sort of specific partisan divide on the specific question of nuclear power right now.
All right. Well, Rosanna, I think I'll wrap up then just by asking you what you think the future holds, really. So you mentioned coal, and we've been hearing that they've had to increase coal purchases to make up for the gap in natural gas and nuclear. So what do you anticipate the mix of energy will be in the future? Are they going to have to really reverse course on nuclear? Because now with the sabotage of Nord Stream, it doesn't look like that's even going to start sending gas to Germany again next spring, like I think maybe some people were hoping would happen. So what should we expect from this situation over the next couple of years?
Well, I would hope for Germany to find solutions that are long-term and relatively reliable. That would be a good thing. I mean, renewables, I'm not against renewables at all. The marginal cost of them is incredibly cheap. But of course, they not only need a lot of investment, but there's also the risk involved that, if the sun doesn't shine and if the wind doesn't blow, then you don't get any energy that day. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're really dependent, or where there is this uncertainty whether you are going to get energy or not. We're seeing that with Russia at the moment with their gas deliveries. Also with France in a sense, because now, of course, they're looking after themselves first before they're thinking of exporting anything, which is understandable. So what I would hope for Germany to take from this as a sort of lesson, and maybe for other countries as well, is that being independent and to a sense also sovereign when it comes to something as important as energy, which is so critical for your whole economy and infrastructure, then I think being independent and that you can rely on yourself for that would be a really good thing. So I think nuclear is a good option because it delivers stable. It's a stable source of energy. Coal, I can live with that as well. Of course, it's not as climate friendly as some would say. Maybe nuclear would provide a better solution for that. But certainly something more long term and stable would be what I hope for Germany to look into next.
And Rosanna, if I can ask, is there any part of the German political environment right now that you think offers anything resembling hope for serious long-term answers? Again, obviously, changing over from Angela Merkel is a gigantic change. I mean, it's something that us as Americans used to kind of presidential terms can't even really, I think, fathom. Within the construct of a democratic system, right? A leader that has this sort of legacy and power that Merkel has, and obviously that no longer there. Perhaps a good thing. So a lot of criticisms there as well. But is there any political movements at all that you think might be getting closer to the sort of serious, that seems at the very least to recognize the very real problems that Germany has right now, and providing any sort of hope that they might even stumble upon some real solutions going forward?
Well, I'm a bit pessimistic in that sense. I have to say, I think just because you've seen what pretty much every party has said in 2011 that it's such a great thing and that we're doing the right thing here. And also with building Nord Stream 2, for example, increasing our reliance, there was very few opposition in that regard. And if so, it came from outside, really. So only now that we're in this situation now, some, argue for nuclear maybe, or for being more independent when it comes to our energy source. So to me, it seems to be this case of saying whatever is popular at the moment. And now that the bills are rising, of course, if you are talking of maybe returning to nuclear, that seems to be somewhat popular, at least with the German population, which to me makes me think that it's a thing of winning the next election, essentially. So I'm a bit pessimistic in that sense, but maybe if anything, then a crisis like this, if the German economy survives it, and if people survive the cold winter months, of course, then maybe this would sort of be the starting point for people to talk about more serious and, in that sense, sustainable solutions politically as well as in terms of our energy supply.
Yeah, and that's maybe something we haven't mentioned enough during this discussion, is just how much more some people are paying in terms of energy costs. It does seem to vary by country, but some of these bills we've seen coming to people, energy bills, in both the UK and in Germany, it seems to be where most of the news is coming out, seems to be significant. So I'm assuming, I could be wrong, I'm assuming there's real political pressure to solve the problem, but it sounds like there's no real necessarily a consensus within the public as to how that would come about.
Also not with in between politicians, so they also can't really decide what would be the right thing to do, or if they do, then like I said, they think something else the next day. So there have been various solutions proposed to deal with this. One would be nationalizing the industry, or at least certain parts of it, like they have done with Uniper, which is Germany's biggest gas provider. They're now in the process of nationalizing that. Then there's this tax which they're thinking of introducing from beginning of October, also to pay for failing energy companies. There's also something that is called Sondervermögen, which translated means something like extra budget or special funds, but really it's just increasing debt. So that's an option now, as well as price caps are being discussed. So a variety of options here, but no one really can agree on what would be the best measure here.
Well, this really is my last question this time. On terms of foreign policy, right, so much of this just comes from a worsening of the relationship between NATO members and Russia. And of course, much of it is in response to the invasion of Ukraine. But there are different ways to respond to that, some more hardline, some less hardline. What would you say is the sentiment in Germany in terms of, yes, we, of course, disapprove of the invasion of Ukraine, and we don't want to pretend like nothing's happening there, but maybe we should do our best to open some avenues of trade and communication with the Russians as best we can to maintain some level of civil discourse here, even though it's during wartime, as of course was common throughout human history, right? It wasn't always necessarily the case that every time one country goes to war with another country, the only option is total obliteration of the other side, right? There's plenty of precedent for carrying on diplomatic and trade relations with countries you're even at war with. Is there sentiment for that sort of thing, or is there just generally very staunch anti-Russian sentiment right now, and so little chance of restarting more normal trade relations short of a total Russian withdrawal?
I think it depends who you ask. So if you were to speak to politicians, for example, government officials, then they are all pretty united, more or less united on the stance of we're continuing with the sanctions against Russia. There are now talks with all EU member states on introducing more sanctions, new sanctions on Russia, and also, continuing support for Ukraine. I think they're pretty united on that front. If you were to ask German people, well, I think they want their energy bills to go down, first of all. But I also do think it's one of these things, like when you do a survey and you ask people, oh, do you want increased spending on welfare programs? And then they say yes. Do you want your taxes to go up? No. I think it's a bit of a similar situation here as well. If you were to ask, do you want your energy bills to go down? Yes. Do you want to continue with the sanctions? Yes. I think it's a bit of a similar thing here. But I also think it almost doesn't matter anymore, because I think it's pretty certain that Russia is not going to reconsider and deliver more gas maybe in the next coming months. Of course, to go back to the beginning now with the leaks from the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, it seems like there is almost no hope for any gas to flow through the pipeline in the next months.
Okay, well, we'll have to let that be the last word here on this episode of Radio Rothbard. Thank you, Tho. Thank you, Rosanna. Look out for Rosanna's future articles at Mises.org. And of course, you can look at her article archive. That's Rosanna Weber at Mises.org. And so thank you all for this discussion. And thank you to those who are listening. And we'll see you next time.